Chris Smith. I'm out of IDMWORKS, originally British, now live in Jacksonville, Florida. Haven't got the accent yet. Not quite yet, anyway. So I've been in identity since 2000, mostly as a practitioner over the years, really helping clients solution things now. Constant problem for me is really driving visibility into all of the applications that you'll have. And that's really what we're talking about today. So for me, there's been a lot of challenges over the years in trying to centralize some of this information. We've had a couple of clients specifically come to us and say, hey, like, I've got all of these apps. There's not a bunch of ways to get into them and to get good insight for one reason or another. We'll talk about those. Just to really try to make it part of the identity governance processes rather than having it as an outlier. So we'll talk about a bit more about that challenge, and then we'll really dive into, what are the requirements to really get this done, and then we can talk a little bit about what we have done to help clients successfully get through this specific problem. And again, I think for most of the people in the room, right, if you're running identity governance, like how many apps do you have in it? Like 10 or 15 or 25, maybe 100 if you're doing really well. Like, what do we do for the rest of those? Like, does everybody have that problem? Anyone? Somebody must, because everyone's like, come here, right? So that's what we're gonna figure out. But real quick, so one of the reasons I came to IDMWORKS was the maniacal focus on identity. Super important to me. I don't want to be distracted by a bunch of other things. Identity is a very interesting subject. It's been great for me over the years. And that's why I came to IDMWORKS, and that's why I feel our clients come to us as well. Now, 75% of IAM projects deliver less than expected. Now, I'm not saying that they're failing. I'm saying that, hey, in the original business case that we put together to deliver an identity program, we set certain boundaries with this. Hey, life's gonna be so much better on the other side. Hey, we're gonna have visibility into everything. Hey, we're gonna be able to have somebody join the organization and they're gonna have access to what they need to be able to do their job. And I feel like we never quite get there. And for the most part, it's because we've got a lot of apps in our environment, and they're very diverse. People buy them all the time. Sometimes we keep them for 30 years and keep on modernizing them a little bit. A lot of the time, the business, especially these days, with SaaS, we'll go out and buy specific things for specific purposes. And security and IT aren't necessarily in that procurement process, which means that we don't get to understand, well, how can we manage this thing for you and provide you access to it? Then it lands on our desk and everyone's like, well, why can't I access anything? So these are really the challenges of meeting sort of our obligations with our businesses such that they can get access to everything they need. And a lot of the time, I think you find if you spoke to, the different leaders, whether they're in digital, whether they're in compliance, whether it's in, a specific call center or what have you, you'd probably find that they'd be like, well, this is great and all, but I never quite get access to what I need. So, touched on this a little bit, but things that I hear daily basis, I would say. So we talked about full justification of the business case. We still need to do manual provisioning to that application. Like the amount of conversations that I have with clients where they're like, hey, I've got a bunch of tickets and they take forever to do, so I hire more people and it costs me more money to provide access to all of these applications. Like, how do I get away from that? Also, I've got a critical app, the community's super small. Why would I integrate that into my IGA environment? It costs a lot of money to do that, right? We've got other initiatives in place, and for me, this is the constant challenge, right? Everything's a priority until the next thing's a priority, and then we never get around to it. And all of this is just because of the complexity of some of the integrations that we've got to deal with. So too complicated to include in the scope of the deployment, or more often than not, too expensive. How do we do this quicker? How do we get more coverage? How do we close down these coverage gaps? What do we do with the homegrown web apps that have got a nice little admin interface that everybody has to use to do stuff, and we never wrote an API for it? And we don't want to write an API for it because we're going to get rid of it in 5 years. That was 5 years ago. We still have it. Probably still be there in 10 years, right? So, why can't we connect to each of these applications really easily? Well, first one, just covered it, no API. How many applications in our business do we have without a user management API? And if it does have a user management API, does it provide the level of fine-grained details that we need to do, that we need for a certification or an access review? Like, how do we get that level of detail? What we don't want to do is bring some really coarse-grained data into our IGA tool, do a certification, and it's actually a couple of really fine-grained entitlements that are really important to us. We can't see it through the API. Some of our apps, our teams turn the APIs off. Hey, no, this is far too important. This must be done the same way we've been doing it for the last 10 years. The application's legacy. We do not want to write an API for this app so you can connect to it. Or we don't know how it works inside, and the guy left 10 years ago. What do we want us to do? And I think wrapping up those into the kind of non-standard connections bucket, when we do that, we tend to find that things are fragile and that they break easily. So when you start to put all of those together, and then you've got a coverage of, say, 15 apps out of 500, how do we start to look at closing that gap? This is the connectivity conundrum. So in spite of a successful project or IAM program, we still have huge application gaps. And that's really what we're trying to look at solving here. So, what are our options for trying to fix this? Additional phases of integration. Say you've got SailPoint or another identity governance tool. Like, you can 100% get to all of these things with time, with money, with additional phases of integration, implementation. When we go and ask for the same budget again next year that we wanted this year to help integrate things into the environment, we get questions. It's like, I thought you did that already. And kind of feels like, well, when you stop moving your apps portfolio, maybe we will not have to integrate them anymore. And that's never going to happen. So a good option is additional phases of integration if we've got connectors that can support access to those applications. Likewise, custom application connectors. Like, we really try with our clients to avoid this. Very expensive to build them, very time consuming, a lot of testing, a lot of regression testing. Single use, you are the only firm on the planet that's using it that way. If it breaks, you're on your own, and we've got to build it again. So again, for some applications, this is the right way to go. It's just you've got to be super picky with it. Next up, well, like, do we really need to include the app in our IGA solution or in our access solution for that matter? Well, maybe we do, maybe we don't. Let's talk about that. You know, if we don't include it, then what level of risk are we generating? I think everybody knows that, hey, if we've got stale accounts in an application that nobody ever uses, that nobody ever looks at, the chance of compromising that account and nobody ever noticing goes up significantly. So really the level of risk of not applying any compliance controls or any lifecycle controls really doesn't add a lot of value for our firms. You know, for me, this is an option, and people take this option a lot. It's just, it feels very, very risky. You know, why did we do this IGA program in the first place if we're going to leave a bunch of stuff outlying? Then finally, manual ticket requests. I find this is like the number one, hey, we'll just get an extract, and every time somebody wants a change, we'll raise a ticket. We'll have somebody in the help desk do it. Ooh, you know, thousands of tickets, lots of people, lots of time. Nobody ever gets the access that they want on time when they wanted it. But it's a very common approach. And we see this all of the time. And for me, you know, probably the first IGA deployment went with when SOX came out. You know, it's like we started this and we were doing files back then with tickets, and we're still doing files now with tickets. And for me, it really doesn't make sense. So how do we look at fixing this? I guess, like, we'll get into fixing it in a second. So real world impact. So FS firm up in the sort of north central, you know, they've got 2,500 access request tickets per month. They are an IGA client that has spent a lot of money automating as much as they possibly can. 2,500 individual items that need to be manually completed every month. I've got a client sort of down in the southeast where I live. They've got 25 people. All they do is access. And it's okay, maybe we can outsource that and do it more cheaply, right? But like 25 people processing tickets, doing access requests, doing copy paste into an interface, that's tough. And really, it's very error prone. As soon as you introduce sort of human intervention in this provisioning process, then we start to get errors. You know, that maybe it's they chose the wrong access, maybe it's they put the wrong username in, copy and pasted the wrong thing into the wrong place when trying to do this, and you know, it creates a lot of errors. As soon as you're running certifications, if you're a regulated firm or a public firm, and you get hit, first thing the auditors will look at, hey, give me all those tickets. Let me see all of them. Let me go through 10% of them and make sure that they're being completed correctly. Now you can guarantee that in that small 10%, you have got potentially all of the errors that anybody will ever make. And then you have to have the discussion about it. So this becomes really, really tough to deal with on a regular basis. Now, what have we done to try and solve this? So for me, we've got a lot of RPA solutions out there, and I like them a lot. Lots of people are using them for lots of good things. We've got a lot of identity solutions in place. And for me, like keeping our customers happy typically means keeping the cost down and the value high. So how do I integrate an identity management solution with an RPA solution? Well, that becomes a little tough. Like IGA solutions expect specific things at specific points in time. And so for me, the intent here is to deliver RPA capabilities into identity solutions without having to customize them. We do not want to get into the business of regression testing. So with that in mind, what we have built is an API and a persistence layer that connects the identity solution to the RPA solution, and it enables us to manage many, many more applications. And so this is something that we've built for a client upon request, and it's something that we've taken to the next stage as far as, well, how do we modify this in a way that makes sense for more of our clients? And this might look like a simple diagram, and it's intended that way. When we start to go under the hood on this, you know, it starts to get complicated because managing the relationship between identity and RPA is tough. Now, the good thing about this is we can run it from our SaaS environment, which lives up in AWS, so it's all sort of serverless microservices under the hood. And then we've got the bots that we can put wherever we need them, and as close to the application as possible. So if it's SaaS applications, we probably want to run it in our cloud and just allow them through the internet where everything's hosted to talk to those SaaS apps. Hey, I've got that internal app inside my firewall. It cannot be exposed. It was never built to be exposed to the internet. Okay, well, let's put a bot next to it. So this is how we're really approaching it. So if you could imagine SailPoint there on the left-hand side, standard web services connector, no customization, API, persistence, all presented in a way that makes a lot of sense to the identity solution, but at the same time doesn't apply your identity solution doesn't have to understand RPA. It's provided in a way that makes a lot of sense to the identity solution. And this was key for us because we don't want to add more complexity over there, but we do want the value of RPA. Now, in that, when we've done this, we've seen a number of things. So, improved user experience, creating accuracy. These things are really, really accurate. They do it the same way every time, and that's really good. They also work 24/7, 365. Like, they don't take vacations. Well, they do if there's a system update. But other than that, there's not much feeding and watering that goes on. So, whereas we've got a member of staff that's working 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and maybe we need 20 of those to accomplish the task, when we start to queue up these tasks into a bot and it does one after another, it becomes very, very reliable. The level of investment and I guess the technology barrier is really low. So from my perspective, one of the things we really want to talk about is making sure that we're not generating a bunch of change on the apps that we need to integrate with. And the key thing there is we're using the interface that we're probably having people use today to go and make the same modifications that a person would make. And this is what really helps us get in there quickly, deliver a solution, and not require a bunch of technology changes. Likewise, super resource friendly. What do I mean by that? There are not many people that just want to process one ticket after another ticket after another ticket, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. So for me, like bringing this all together, what we're really trying to do is deliver a much better experience to the business. Hey, I want to go request access to something. We bought a new system that does that. Hey, I go request access, and then I get that access very quickly. It's not like a 5-day turnaround or a 10-day turnaround for the access. So that's really what we're trying to do here. And we didn't do a demonstration today, but if anybody would like to see it afterwards, I'd be more than happy to show you an integration that we've built. But with that, any questions on what we've done here? Like, does it make sense? Does it align to like what you see you needing for your own businesses? Sure. So for me, like custom connectors can be very valid, like and with very purposeful like integration. So we can do those. This is another option. So typically those custom integrations would be for an app that has a UI today for user management. So instead of creating a behind the scenes interface, we're literally going to use the existing user interface that is used for user management and have the bot do the work rather than the person, thus avoiding writing the custom connector to start with. Exactly. And that's what it's really all about. It's not a difficult thought process to go through. Hey, does this make sense for all of my apps? Absolutely not. Like, you've got Active Directory, you've got Salesforce, you've got Office 365. Everybody has got very good connectors into those systems, very easy to set up, very quick value. The stuff that starts to fit around the fringes is where we really start to apply these types of technologies. Yeah, so that's interesting because I've got exactly that same discussion with a client at the moment where they're like, hey, I've got all these SaaS apps. The trouble is they've got a SCIM interface, but the SCIM interface doesn't provide the entitlements that they actually want to manage. So it's very coarse-grained sometimes. And this would be another way of avoiding like taking a report, turning it into a CSV file, uploading that into your identity solution, trying to figure out how that transport works, and then doing that again and again and again. So for me, it's automating those processes that we very much have to do today. Okay. Again, if anybody would like to see what we've done, be more than happy to show you. But other than that, thank you very much.